right, welcome to a very special episode of Cloud and Clear. I've been waiting to get this leader on the podcast for such a long time because of everything going on in North Central. So new, so exciting. Please welcome Stacy Meagher, the Managing Director of North Central for Google Cloud.
Thanks, Tony, for having me. Thrilled to be here.
Yeah,
I know it's taken a long time for us to get to here. It feels like an eternity with everything that's gone on at this point.
Well, as you said, a month after you started, everything went on lockdown. So
yeah,
we haven't even met in person. I haven't been out there. So it's been a crazy way to start, I think, a brand new chapter in your career, certainly. Wow. But, like we were talking before the recording started is, we're seeing traction. We're investing in headcount there, and you're seeing tremendous results in a very short amount of time. So I can't wait to talk about all of that.
Yes.
But before we get there, I always like to spend some time talking about my guest. I'd love to hear about your career story, your career trajectory. We always love to highlight, amazing female leadership in tech as well, because I think that's, something we haven't been very good at as an industry. But we're seeing, obviously, even within SADA, some tremendous leadership in place now, and I think we're doing a better job. But anything along those lines. But I think your career is just super, super interesting. So
yeah. Well, it's been a fascinating journey, right? So when I really think about it, I spent 25 years at Microsoft before I came to Google. And in those 25 years at Microsoft, I started when Windows 95 launched. And it was probably a month and a half I joined, and they were launching it in August. And I was just, kid of my life. And during this time, moved to Seattle. And I'm like, I think this thing is bigger than I think this thing is. And it was. So, I journeyed through that company through 3 CEOs. Starting with 95 all the way to Windows NT when we said, hey, we're ready for the enterprise. And we had a lot of work to do there at Microsoft. So I moved 6 times with my career, my journey. And most of it was about going to build a new marketplace, right? So, I spent time in Seattle, and we were building out the channels, and it was all competitive recruitment. We were going after Novell at the time, and then the internet happened and everything went crazy over there. And then I went to Silicon Valley, and it was all about competitive channels and then building out that marketplace in Silicon Valley. And I spent 8 years there during the boom and the bomb, and which was incredible to experience what you have to change from a sales culture to actually go after a marketplace that no longer has people in it, right? Because when the valley imploded, people just dissipated and they left the valley. So that was an incredible experience. And then they asked me if I would go to, and I, at that time also, just as a female leader, I had my second child, and I'm like, I got to get closer to my family. And they said, hey, listen, you got an opportunity to go out to run kind of a similar business, or you could go start this vertical thing with us around retail. And so I had an exciting opportunity to do something what seemed smaller, but actually became very big for Microsoft in retail. And then I had the opportunity to run the Midwest business. I always feel like I kind of center back into the Midwest region, and I ran the business and picked that up right in the middle of the downturn of, what happened in 2008. So again, you're sitting in a situation where you're like, oh my gosh, we got to build something completely new because what we're trying to sell out is not going to work in this environment. And so it was my first and early inception into the cloud. And what I loved about that was, you have to build it from scratch. You're trying to teach people what cloud means in an environment that was, manufacturing and healthcare and, retail and these traditional accounts in this region. And then I got to go to Canada, which was fun, right? So I started in Canada in 12. We had built this massive business and my team, phenomenal team. In the region, and built this massive business of the cloud. And they said, hey, listen, can you go take Canada on and figure it out there? Because Canada couldn't go to the cloud, supposedly.
Right.
And so with banks and telcos and partners, and how do you shape this thing to actually make it run? And so that was a phenomenal experience. And then I got to come back and run the regions, and Central Region and North Central Region. But for me, it's always been about, I love the challenge and I love the build. And when I kind of reflect upon it, and I was looking into my career, I'm like, what am I going to do next? It had to be something that was it needed work and it needed to be built. And, you had some good foundation around the people that were leading it. And Google called and I got to talk to a few people and really made the quick decision to come.
That cohort from Microsoft, so many of the core leaders that are a huge part of Google's enterprise team now at the leadership level are amazing. And I love how Google's gone and gotten sort of the best from wherever they could and build a nice composite team, including, a bunch of people, great leaders from Microsoft. I want to go back to what you said about starting your career at Microsoft at the launch of Windows 95.
Mm-hmm.
That's like starting at Apple when the iPhone came out.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Like that level of frenzy, lines out the door, excitement, transformational technology. I mean, so many people that work for you and I probably don't remember that, but that was an amazing time.
We had at Microsoft. There was we had this learning session. We called it MGX. So they call it Ready Now, but
yep,
it was in Toronto. And since I had just joined, I went to visit my family in Rochester, New York, because that's where I grew up, and took a bus up through the border to go to this conference, right? And as I'm crossing the border, I said, the border guy says, hey, he's like, what are you up here for? And I said, well, I'm going to a Microsoft conference in Toronto for our company. And he goes, are you really going to launch Windows 95 on August 20th? The border guy. And I went, I think this is bigger than I think it is. You just don't know how big it is, but it was super fun. It's anytime you see those curves of inception in an industry, it's like something that moves it and then something that moves again. And what cloud's done for industry and now what machine learning and AI is doing for the industry, it's just, that you're on the cusp of something so new that you have an opportunity to actually just transform companies in a way that you've never had before.
No, I mean, what Windows 95 did for PCs is what iPhone did for phones. I mean, the app ecosystem, the standardization, like the new bar, like market share, all sorts of things were like took a very similar path. And look, I don't know if you remember this, but up until a year and a half ago, we had quite a successful boutique Microsoft cloud business. So I have fond memories of working with Microsoft for literally, 19 years or 18 and a half years. And really the last 10, very focused on the cloud with great relationships, tons of admiration for what Satya has done and that whole leadership team. It was a big part of the business and really my upbringing.
It was an incredible company. It's still an incredible company. It's I have some of my greatest friends that I've worked with over years that have moved around in that company. And Satya is a super leader. It's an incredible company. So it was a difficult decision to leave. People have asked me often why I did. And it was about the build. Super impressive leadership, right? Like if you think about what Thomas Kurian has done and what he's built over the past couple of years. I ran the North Central region of the US for many years, and Google would show up in the strangest places. like honestly, they're nowhere. And then suddenly they're going to rebuild Target. And you're like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
Or, suddenly there's this partnership that forms with Mayo. And you're like, how did they do that? And so when I got the phone call, the biggest thing that I started researching out was the people. I'm like, okay, what's going on? How are they investing? What are they investing in? And I spent so much time in my own bubble that I didn't really pay attention to it. And then as I look through the assets that they have, I'm like, gosh, if you could actually pull together Alphabet and Google Cloud and all the pieces, there's no one else out there that could actually transform a customer digitally, which is and digital is, I guess, overused, but in a way with data and in a way with speed, no one else can do that as fast as Google could. It's just, Google just needs some enterprise discipline, right? Like it needs those pieces inside of it. And what an opportunity to go build something with a bunch of people that you have a lot of respect for in the industry. Put the pieces together, which is kind of my systems brain, goes put the pieces together, and then take some of my experience of running enterprise for so many years and actually bring it to the table. And so, after meeting with Kirsten and Hamadou and the team, it just became almost like an exciting no-brainer. Like
Yeah.
it just was so exciting about the opportunity to go build it that they said, hey, listen, come to this region. It needs a bunch of help. And we're putting a lot of resources into it. Come do it. And I was like, the answer is yes.
Yeah. And just even in those two leaders, you're talking about like Microsoft, Red Hat, Oracle, just like
Yeah.
that combination of amazing leadership at the global level or the super regional level, I guess, for Kirsten. But, I think what's interesting is if you look at North Central, and we've been, selling with Google for 14 years, and we've seen the evolution of not only the products, but go to market, but also the maturation of territories and regions. You're now selling in one of Microsoft's or other cloud providers' biggest territories and most successful regions.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know that because you built it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and for Google, it hasn't been as big per se. And I have my own thoughts around as to why, but it's been underserved by both Google and by its partners, frankly. And I think that's why you're there, and Lila and Deb, and that's changing quickly. But you've signed up for something quite difficult, because selling as the incumbent, very, very different than what we're doing every day at SADA too, across US and Canada, which is you're never the incumbent.
I think that's why it was such a big opportunity, because at the end of the day, we can say Microsoft and Amazon, and I have a great partner in crime, Roshni Joshi, who runs engineering for the region. And she came actually from Amazon. So she spent some time at EMC and came from Amazon. And so you got her that was running Amazon. You got me that was running Microsoft at the time. But and people would say in the region, sometimes you get like, do they own it? And the fact is, Microsoft and Amazon doesn't own it. In most of these cases, we have traditional customers that are in the region. They've formed strong, trusted partnerships with vendors and partners in the cloud, but they're all looking at opportunity to do things that are faster and speedier. And while they are moving their infrastructure, and in some cases there were some really, really big wins there, digitally transforming how they work with customers, and particularly in this pandemic and this environment, has forced them to do things in such a rapid pace that they never had to do before, that the game is wide open. I think, I don't want to say that there's room for three of us. I always hate to be number three, but the fact is there's plenty of playing field on how people are transforming their businesses. And Google has a unique perspective of not locking them in, making sure that they have choice, thinking about the world in true hybrid. What we've done with some of our announcements with, I think BQ is an Omni is just fascinating, right? Yeah. It's the dream that people have, which is, how do I work with clouds across data? And Google's pushing their way forcefully into that, and making sure that they have choice. And they're not charged these fees and these egress fees from their competitors that we're partnered, that we need to be somewhat, if we're right for the customers, partnering with in a different type of way. So there's plenty of playing field in this region, but this region is also about trust, and it's about relationship. And so we've spent a lot of time over the past year and a half hiring people. I think the US has hired 2,000 people, 1,000 people. Crazy, yeah. My region has gone from, I think 30 people at one time to like over 250, right? So you're talking about just a massive hiring of people for this region and leadership. And you've got to put them local. Like, they have to be part of Minnesota's culture. You have to be part of, what's happening in Indianapolis. And because they're people that your kids go to school with, and they're people that, transfer from one company to another company, so that those relationships are super bound and super tight. And when you start to win with one company, you win across regions, and it starts to propel itself in this area in particular. And quite candidly, they just didn't know how to partner with Google in a way. They couldn't figure out what Google's purpose was to them. And that's our team's job, is to help them figure out how we can really help them transform within their businesses and industries.
So Google, I think, historically has been obviously, very big in the West, very big in tech and digital natives, et cetera. Um, we've seen over the last year and a half, actually pretty significant shift as we've started going hyper regional focused, hyper local focused. We've seen a big, stuff starts in the West, but then immediately goes to the East and then South Central, Canada, North Central. We're seeing reports that say, hey, the East core business is now on fire, or like South, Southwest is as interesting as North, as this Bay Area. So we've seen this sort of over time, the adoption of Google Cloud kind of penetrate these more traditional markets. And so I'd like to have hear your view on what it takes to win in the traditional enterprise with traditional companies that are not digital natives, they're not ISVs. What is it going to take?
Well, gosh, it's such a broad question, but it does come down to basic enterprise things, right? If you think about its relationships, it's about having the right leadership and point of view. You have to have industry point of view, right? This is manufacturing, retail, agriculture, CPG. That's a land in which we live in this space, right? So if you're not coming in with a point of view in partnership in agriculture, and your competitors you're not going to win, right? Because they're looking for you to help them take them on this innovative journey. And that's why the partnerships across Google are super important. We formed, when I first got here, I'm like, okay, I know that Microsoft has this thing over here for farmers. What's the thing that we have? And what was crazy about it is we have it sitting right over there in Google X. We formed some great partnerships with Elliot and his team over there. And he's got robotics and precision. And I'm like, oh my goodness, there you are. I'm like, okay, so if I can just put Google together with what we're doing and the great platforms and partnerships that Thomas and team have formed, you've got to have the partnerships with the partners, with the ISVs. You need to be partnering with some of the biggest players in the industry, like an SAP and Oracle or Salesforce. Those things just need to be like table stakes in partnering in the enterprise. And you can see what he's done there. So between the industry points of view of what Google can bring, plus those partnerships coming on board, and then you do make sure you have a services organization, but don't kill your partners. Make sure that you are in the right spaces for that. Make sure that you have the right support and customer success, and you're piling on the engineering organization to make sure that you can show them how to get things done quickly. Those are the things that actually make the foundation of the business. And now that we're in the position that we're in, and I think it's just amazing, even what's happened over the past, 8 months since I've been here, we have such a great platform and such great partnerships forming that customers are kind of waking up to, gosh, I was wondering when you were going to show up here. Yeah. You walk in, like, I had like 3 meetings last week and they're like, that was what I was looking for, right? Yeah. And it's really, rewarding to see the relationships that the teams are building and the conversations that they're having, which are conversations that are so deeply rich in transformation that were different than what I was doing prior. You're talking CMO, CEO, chief data officer relationships, and the CIO needs to be part of that game with them. Yeah. And so it's fun to watch and see the teams really break through those relationships and really start to work out the work streams that will take the customers forward. And with that, you're going to win the data centers. And with that, you're going to win the trust for the big deals. And that's what's happening here right now.
I think the biggest transformation in thinking that Thomas and Rob and Kirsten and others have brought to Google Cloud, because there's still very prevalent pieces of the overall Google DNA in Google Cloud, right? The biggest thing that they brought is this sort of realization that the best technology doesn't automatically win in the enterprise.
Sure.
That's right. Consumer tech, when switching costs are nothing, if TikTok's better than Instagram, they're like, I'm going to switch to TikTok. Like, I'm just going to use that, right? Like, the switching costs are relatively small. Or Google Maps is the best maps. Like, nobody's going to use MapQuest, and it's all we have to worry about is making the tech the best. But it's all those other things you've been describing that are so important, because an enterprise is making a 5 or 10 year bet that's massive. It doesn't even almost matter that much. Like, if you're slightly more performant today, they're like, I'm betting on you doing that for the next 10 years?
Right.
What assurances are you going to provide? Like, how much confidence do I have you care about my industry, et cetera? And I think not until Thomas Kurian came along, we started to see these composite deals, the public ones, the Sabre or Activision. Like, these are not about feeds and speeds and data centers.
That's right.
These are like, we're going to revolutionize gaming and stream stuff on YouTube with Activision. We're going to completely transform the travel booking experience, starting at google.com for Sabre. So prior to Thomas Kurian, bringing those pieces of Google Alphabet into the enterprise pursuit was a very challenging task.
Yeah, it's interesting. And even some of the early conversations that I had, they're like, hey, listen, you guys haven't been super fun to partner with. And inside of Google, they're like, help me understand. And it's like, we can go after this enterprise together. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be part of me to be the, to partner in a way that's differentiating. And those conversations with inside Google are happening everywhere right now. Inside between Alphabet and Google is tremendous. When you're talking to like energy companies and, DeepMind has this, wind trading optimization platform. You're like, where did that come from? And how do I get it in front of my customers?
How do I charge for it? What's the SKU? How do I charge for it? How do I?
and then we think monetization, right? Like, because our heads, like enterprise people always go to, we can make a fortune off of that. And the customers will save so much money. And wow, when those two things fit together, it's just beautiful. But I think that's the general awareness that we spent, and the pandemic's, made things more challenging, but we've spent a lot of time just getting our point of view across to our customer. It's like, hey, here's why we're here, and here's how we can help, and here's how we think in your industry, how things are changing. And that creates a really fascinating conversation and relationship. And the other thing that's really interesting about what you brought up is it is different, right? Like I always joke with Oliver, my peer, I always say, you keep selling, you keep doing what you're doing, and I got to go sell to people to make cheese, and I sell to people to build tractors, and I'll feed the planet, you and energize.
Like doing deals like Palo Alto and stuff. You're like,
I'm like, it's not digital native land, though we do have
Twitter.
It's just not digital native land.
You're selling to Twitter. You're selling to John Deere or whatever.
That's right. That's right. But it's how we come in partnership to them, and then feeling secure in the fact that we know enterprise. Like, do you understand that if this thing goes down, I can't build bulldozers and the world will shut me down. That is the level of trust they need to get to with us, which they're getting to. And then when they see the speed in which we can innovate with them, that changes their complete mindset. It's like, okay, that's just table stakes. This is where I need to be. So it's been fun, particularly with the industry solutions that Thomas has been pushing so far forward with, around digital pathology, around what we're doing with predictive maintenance or worker safety and supply chain analytics. Those conversations are very, very rich. And we have a ton of product and technology and asset to just go in there and do things very quickly for our customer, which really changes the game.
What I love about the Google Cloud, just the implementations and the pursuits, et cetera, is that, and I remember doing this at Microsoft for many years. There was times where people bought Microsoft technology, or I could say the same about AWS, and they implemented it and it changed nothing about the organization. Mm-hmm. I think it's impossible to implement Google Cloud or Workspace or GCP or anything and not change.
That's right. It's interesting, when you think about some of the things that surprise you the most. I lived in this world in which, you didn't really go to Google products, right? You kind of, I think I pressed the button in my orientation. It was one of the last classes in orientation before I sat in this chair, right?
Yeah.
I think it was a month before pandemic happened, but, they said, do you want to change your browser to Chrome? And I went, yes. For the first time in my life. And it was crazy because there were things about Google I just didn't know. I didn't know.
No, when you work for Microsoft and Satya made it a little more open, obviously, but
That's right.
like you can use Google search, you can
Yep.
use any other browser. It was, iPhones ripped out of your hands. Like they made it very difficult to understand the rival, actually,
That's
which
right.
is not the best
That's right.
strategy.
So there's a couple of things that happen. It's like people go, what surprised you? First of all, you talked about it. The engineers here are just incredibly bright. Like, and they're super built on Google's passion and Googliness and thinking 10x, and it's
Yeah.
in respecting the user. So you have this core foundation of culture that's just innate within the company, and then this just tremendous passion of innovation. So the engineers here are crazy smart. And then the first thing that came out in the meeting was Google's focus on security. And they talked about respecting the user. And I'm like, I used to tell stories about Google that they're going to try to take your data. They're going to try to do this. And it is absolutely fundamentally wrong. Just the amount of work the company puts into, and the amount of R&D we put into making sure that your information is so protected, and that the security is deep and layered and rich to protect the user is
Totally.
mind-boggling. And then
it's existential for Google. Like they can't have anything but, like, they're the biggest target of every hacker organization on the planet. There's no bigger target in the world. Like, so they better have, the best security posture of any cloud provider.
Well, that's it, right? You can't run these billion user businesses, 9 of them very successfully, and have people's information being taken from them. So, and so the amount of time and energy and resource spent on that, and then plus you add the fact that we have 40% of the world's internet traffic running through our fiber, and growing, and the pandemic numbers have changed obviously to make it even larger.
Yeah.
That's the type of stuff that so we've been running enterprise in this company for years. Like that's what we've done, and the ability to take all that technology and actually bring that forward to our customers. It's almost like when they kind of connect dot plus dot, they go, I just did not know that. I didn't think of it that way. And so
Google services have been running containerized for like 10, 15 years, right? Like
Kubernetes and pass it to open source, right? Like it's an incredible amount of richness and assets that enterprises have looked for a long time. And they form partnerships to try to get to it. And some of those work and some of those are missing pieces. And that's where I think we come into play. And then I think, you topple it with just this amazing culture. It is just, particularly even in this pandemic.
Especially in the pandemic, I think. Especially in the pandemic.
Yeah, I remember I'd been here for a glorious month, and it was like a little over a month, and I had done my traditional stuff, right? Like the week before, I was on the road with one of my my managers. We were floating around Michigan visiting customers. Then I went to Indianapolis, got off a plane. Monday morning, we did some people conversations around like who our talent is and what we need to do with them to keep developing them. And then I get a call from Janet. It's like Tuesday or Wednesday of that week that says, hey, listen, it looks like we're going to close our offices. And I'm like, really? You think we're going to do that? She's like, Stacy, I think this is super serious. And she goes, we're going to close our offices. I need you to know. And since I run like 10, I'm like, oh my gosh. So the first thing I do is actually call my parents. The first thing you think is like, how do we make sure everybody's safe, right? That's the number one goal. I called my parents. I said, Mom and Dad, don't stay in the house. Because if they're going to be that serious, you need to stay in the house because they have some, older issues. And Google just went straight on to the people. It's like, how do we make you feel comfortable? How do we make you safe? Let's make sure that you're in a good space. Let's make sure that you have the things that you need to work at home. It's just so thinking about their people.
Yeah.
And then it was, how do we help our customers? Don't sell them. Don't sell.
Serve, not sell. That was like a famous speech now. Like it's going to go down in history as like a famous speech that Kristen Kliphouse gave. Serve, not sell. Yeah.
Serve, not sell. Serve, not sell. And so you have all these new people that are experiencing, in some cases, Google for the first time. 60% of my organization came in, and have never seen me in person or their manager in person. And so It's really about how do you put your arms around your people? How do you put your arms around your customers and actually just help? And I think that was, an area where Google did a really good job, both for small businesses
Well,
and for customers. And it allowed us to put our name on the map a bit more of, hey, Google's here to help more so. It created challenges, but it did help. It did help. And who thought we'd still be here?
well, look, it's one of those things that has a big influence on the partner ecosystem and the community too. Like we look at Google's posture and behavior and modeling, and we, especially at SADA, because this is all we do, we just read the tea leaves and we kind of mimic that behavior. So it's a great principle to have and a great benefit to have. Like, we know how to behave. Yeah, our culture is already pretty well groomed, but like, if Google's doing it this way, then we should think about that too, right? So it's a great comfort to be so aligned, and great to have that beacon to kind of aspire to, which I think is a great segue to what I want to talk about. Because as you said, like, from a Google presence standpoint, North Central has been underserved, but I think it has also been underserved by the partner community, and I think there's some historical reasons for that. There was a period where North Central region was fondly known as the partner graveyard. If you want to hear about that one day, I'll tell you why. But
I think I got an earful from a lot of you when I first got here.
okay, so you've heard the partner graveyard. You have to be around for like a decade as a partner to kind of know the full history. But I think that's obviously changing, and we can wait to reinvest. And we have Courtney Graham in market, but also the people she's brought on, and some of our top engineering talent is based in Chicago and surrounding areas. But that begs the question: what do you need from partners? Because there's lots of parts of the value chain. Like, where do you need partners to show up, and how?
Gosh, this is a great question. So first of all, I I heard a lot, when I got on board, like, about how we partnered with partners, or where we played. And listen, partners have an opportunity to invest wherever they want to invest. It's like, so our ability to get partners to come to this region is about us also creating the demands of why should you hire an engineer in Chicago? Should you hire an engineer in Indianapolis? Or should you hire an engineer in Silicon Valley? And so we have to do twice as much work, 4 times as much work, to make sure that partners know that if they put their money in this region, that it's worth their time. And so a lot of the early stage work that we did, I think when I first got here, I looked at my calendar. It's like, what have I accomplished? When I first got here, we spent like, I must have had like 25 partner meetings just to listen to why they weren't investing here, or what had happened, and what we needed to do to build the region, and give them a point of view around what we were going to do. And it instilled some confidence, I think, in some of the partners to say, okay, maybe I should but it sounds like something's going to be different here. So what do we need? We need strong leaders and technical talent and relationships. We need partners that are going to come in with a very strong point of view. And we need you in early. So we're still forming these relationships with customers that, in some cases, because the partners weren't investing in here, they were investing in other places, may not know the partners that we think are our best partners.
Right. That's right.
So it's getting you in early and often is going to be a big key here. We also need some local partners that have local relationships. And there are, in these regions, if you look in these states, there's particular partners that sit in these areas that have very long-standing relationships. So our ability to invest in making sure that they understand Google and why they should care to partner with us is very important. And so we're spending a lot of time on that. I just recently hired a partner leader, Deborah Sickenhorn, to come on board. And she's forming this amazing team of partner leaders that are helping this region really amplify the partner relationships that we need to have. We've made a lot of investment as well in some of the largest GSIs. There's a ton of them in this region that work with these traditional customers. And so getting them to understand why Google is different and what we can do and speed with them is super, super critical. So I would say, I think my message out there is the business is growing pretty rapidly. It's a good time to invest in this
Yeah.
area.
Yeah.
But don't let us try to run the thing alone first, right?
Yeah.
We should always have a partner with us at the front of the gate.
Absolutely.
Yeah, at the front of the gate.
It's
So
hard to explain later. Like you can't be like on stage 3, be like, meet SADA.
mhm,
Customers will be like, who
no.
are these guys?
That's right. That's right. And I think that's starting to work. We're starting to see some of the business really pick up. It's starting to work pretty effectively. I want to turn around. I think one of the biggest things that always broke my heart when I first got here was we have a great practice. I had some partners that actually were here in this region that spend all their time in everybody else's region.
Yeah, that's
So I
true.
have to make sure that I am so much more interesting than Oliver and Michael. Right, that's my my job is to make it more interesting. But
Like,
um,
part of it is putting dedicated resources
mhm,
that are going to live and die by the success of North Central as a partner, which is
that's it.
something we've done. And we really do look at each region independently, and we have for the last couple of years. As you know, as Google became more enterprise, like it was okay for me not to have presence in Florida when Google didn't either.
Yes,
It was
that's right.
acceptable, right? Same thing
Right.
with wherever Detroit, um, Indianapolis. But when Google started to show up, we're like, well, we have to show up too. It's going to be really awkward to not have presence there and to be taken seriously. And then what was really evident to us, really, going back to 3 4 years, is what you described about the local market
Yeah,
aspect. Like people in Chicago don't want to be sold to out of Austin.
they
There's
don't.
no way. And I think the biggest
And people
hurdle
in
that we
Wisconsin don't want to be sold by people in Chicago. Let's be super
even
clear. It's even that deep, right?
the biggest hurdle, like I think the biggest test, I would say, and I think North Central is going to be a great test because I think the opportunities there is going to be amazing and it's underserved. We have a great opportunity to stand out and deliver a big part of your number
Mhm,
and Lila's number, but has been Canada has been interesting because
mhm.
we were told like, dude, you guys are US LA company. There's no way you're gonna go and kind of fake it and pretend like and think that Canada's a 51st state and blah blah blah. And we're like, no, we're not gonna do that. Like we're gonna set up a Canadian entity and hire local
Yeah.
resources and then look. Fast forward a year, we had 2 people in Canada. Now they have like 24, and I think we're making a huge impact market share wise. But that is what's going to take in every territory
That's right.
the dedicated headcount, the focused, leadership, and I think we will bring the unique value proposition that we've proven and learned in the West and the East and other territories, and bring it to North Central. That's the other thing that we're seeing resonate because the first sort of partner commit deal for GCP was literally just a little over 3 years ago. It was at Reltio with
Wow.
Thomas Durant. I just had Manish, who's now the founder and now no longer the CEO, but the CTO at Reltio on the podcast, and we were reminiscing about how far we've come in 3 years. But imagine that 3 years was the first ever partner commit on the planet,
That's such a crazy.
and now they just recommitted for now they're an enterprise, no longer corp, which Thomas Grant upset about. He has a few of those he saw.
Yeah.
Now they're it's a $25 million commit, etc. And then we took it to Canada, and then I think literally last December was the first ever Canadian commit
Yeah.
done with a partner. So taking everything we learned from like the fast moving Maverick West to more traditional industry territories, there's some benefit to that, and that's going to be what we kind of chisel away at as we build our credibility and earn our keep in North Central over time.
Listen, I mean, it's fascinating, right? So, I know we talk about digital native and traditional customers. You know, the ability to innovate and move fast in your experience that you've had in the West Coast totally translates into these traditional customers in this region because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for speed and agility. It probably more so than they ever have. I mean, what's happened with this pandemic to force them into a situation where they've got to change rapidly. I mean, everything's gone mobile. You're like, how do you change? I mean, grocery stores have been hit crazy, right? If you think about what they had to
Crazy.
do just overnight to think about voice enabled technologies and how they deliver and how they think about their supply chains or demand forecasting that moves like, everybody knew there was a holiday and it happened over here. This is very different. Those experiences that you bring to the table to partner with them in that speed of imagination. And in some cases, we're like, we've never been able to do that. So how can we do that? And so it's the ability to kind of get in there, show them
Yeah.
quickly what can be done.
Totally.
And that's the wow factor of it. I was on with, one of our financial services organizations, just around how they process loans just with, the work that we've done with Document AI, the work that we've done with Lending AI, they cannot even believe how fast we can go through just documents that take
Yeah,
them weeks and
totally.
weeks and weeks to process. And so it's that reimagination for some of these companies in their head because they've done some hard work in
Yes.
some cases, not everybody.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, I'm moving some of this infrastructure and taking out some of these costs. But it hasn't gotten me fully digital. It's helped me reduce my costs, but I'm not getting myself to a point where I can digitally handle what I need to do with customers that
Yeah.
some tech native will figure out in my industry if I don't watch it.
100%. Exactly. What we learned there is extremely relevant because for every one of them, there's 100 of the tech natives trying to completely disrupt their industry. But you have to approach it with, I think, the technical confidence in past performance, but also the openness and the humility in the enterprise to say, I have to talk to you in your language.
That's right.
I may not know everything about you. Just because I did this somewhere else doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. And I think that humility also sometimes I think has been missing. But together with Google and this new enterprise leadership, I think we just it's no longer like, oh, put the engineers together, my engineers and yours, and we're going to win the deal. No, it's like it's a lot more than that. But I think this is a tremendous time. I actually think we're more purpose-driven than ever because of the pandemic, because we know what we can do to not only make sure these traditional enterprises survive, but thrive in this new world. And those like Target and others who figured out how to use their sort of built-in assets and competitive advantage, whether it's infrastructure or distribution or customers, and then add some of those capabilities that users, customers crave from digital natives. It's tremendous. Best Buy's done a really good job. Target's done a good job. Kohl's has done a good job. But I think what we have to start also doing, especially in regions like North Central, is not just win the digital natives across the world for Google Cloud. That's not going to get it done. We have to use that learning to go and tackle the traditional enterprise, but also net new logos, net new customers. And that's going to be like
Detroit
mantra.
Right. Like if you think about it, if you can win in Detroit, right? If you can to help the autos digitally transform and take on their next innovation, next generation thinking, and partner with them, and you win in auto, the autos will talk to each other and other autos will come. And so it is our ability to do that. I think it's, in so many years in selling in the enterprise, 25 years of doing that, it comes down to people, it comes down to culture. Companies want to align themselves to the company that aligns to their culture or can help them with their culture in ways. But I think this ability to do choice and what we're doing with our platforms on choice is highly beneficial to customers right now. And it allows them to get the best of all worlds if that's what they want. Our ability to do that with data and change the way they think about how data, I used to talk about it all the time. It's like, how do you get the insights? How do you transform your entire business with the data that you have is where we thrive. And so, and then getting that language right, knowing your customer, knowing their industry, and then being humble about it and saying, I don't know as much, but I've invested a lot here. In these things, let me see if I can bring my smart tech people and your smart tech people together, but let's have an open, candid dialogue of what are you really trying to solve? And those are some of the great relationships we're forming.
Well, we have a lot of work ahead of us. 2020 has been very, very challenging, but also I feel very blessed to be working in the industry we're working together in partnership with Google Cloud, because we're in a position to help, right? And really show up for all of our customers, continue to show up and help them innovate. And 2021 should be, just as exciting. I think the one thing that's certain is that we don't know what's going to happen.
That's right.
And I think just helping our customers and our people be ready for anything is sort of the calling card of 2021, I think.
Yeah, it's I think we do know what's going to persist. This working relationship this way actually works. I wouldn't say, it's funny, you have conversations with your people. They're like, we're all effectively building partnerships this way and getting things done this way. I think we're a bit more fatigued than we ever have been. Probably in some cases, almost doing twice as much as we did before. Yes, we can squeeze in 15-minute meetings. People do miss the social interaction, right? There's something to be said about having a dinner with a customer or going to an executive briefing with a customer. But we do know that this phenomenon is going to persist in a way that has changed the industry. It's funny, with the launch that we just launched with the Google Workspace.
Yes.
Probably one of the most surprising things to me is I've again lived in this world in which you collaborate in a certain way, and then you come to this world and they say, hey, listen, I go, okay, where am I supposed to store? What folder do I put this in? And they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I'm like, I need to find things, or like, don't be in that document because I'm in that document and it'll get messed up. Those types of things. But we have just some amazing platforms that fuel this world's ability to collaborate. And lots of users of changing the way culturally they're trying to do things. And it's our ability to connect with our customers and make sure we understand what they're trying to solve. And that's persistently what we're trying to do in the region with all of the new faces here.
Totally. Like Chicago has just as a market is near and dear to my heart, because back in the day doing a lot of EDU work, Stacy, which is where kind of the whole G Suite thing started with us and Google. Deploying Chicago public schools was like one of my favorite personal projects. And I think at the time, I'm pretty sure I project managed it myself back then. But like putting 600,000 or 700,000 like students, not all in the best, financial situation, giving them the best tools that like Colgate had.
So cool.
It was like the best. And I think it's just, beginning of the seeding of the next generation of information workers as well, right? Like, what do they expect when they come to work? And I can't wait to partner with you more closely. I appreciate you being on the podcast, and I also appreciate you taking the time to get to know SADA and my team and what we're going to bring to the table. We intend to be number one or number two in every region that we work. So we're going to continue to invest. That's one thing you'll see. Like we're actually never going away. So we'll just have more and more investment over time. And we're only going to do this in US and Canada. So we're just very focused in our view of the world. And all we do is Google Cloud. And thank you so much for choosing Google Cloud, coming on board. I think we're just scratching the surface of what we'll be able to do together in the years to come.
Well, Tony, thank you for having me on the podcast. I appreciate, and Google appreciates, the partnership for many of years that you've been persistent in, and thank you for your persistence in the region and your investments. It's partners like yourself that are really going to help us drive the relationships we need to with our customers, and they're expecting us to come to the table with great people that can do this work. And so thank you for the investments continuously, and thanks for keeping North Central region at the top of your list here.
For sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Cloud and Clear. Check the show notes for links to this week's topics. And don't forget to connect with us on Twitter @Cloud and Clear and our website, sada.com. Be sure to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app.